You're still watching Morning right here on Delta Television. We are the People's Pride. It's time for us to look at the papers and know what's going on all around the country, matter of fact, the world. With us to look at the papers, it's nobody else but engineer Meshach Oza. He's our analyst, he's our friend, he's a lover of the people, and he shall share his opinions as regards the headlines this morning. Good morning and good to have you here.
Always a pleasure.
I'll share a handshake. I know you've missed me.
I do. Yes, I'll compliment you. Yes, let me clean up the negative handshake, man.
This our banter will not stop.
Yes.
Any soon, will it?
Yeah, because you support the bad government a lot.
I support the bad government.
Yes, you're always trying to play devil's advocate, so I agree.
Let's see if I would support the bad government today.
Or rather, you show empathy to them.
Bad government.
Yes.
I would not have any adjective to describe them, bad or good. I'll just say the government. I try to look at the other side. Let's see what's going on and see if I would support the government or show empathy this morning. We have several papers, the News Telegraph, the Vanguard, the Punch, the Guardian, Daily Independent, loads of them. But we'll start with the New Telegraph this morning. And the big headline on the New Telegraph says, further price hike imminent as fuel hits 855 naira to 940 naira per litre. The writer says why NNPC Limited sole buyer of Dangote PMS by sources and several other writers. At the top strip, CBN letter of credit payments declined by 57.04% to $391.91 million. And at the bottom strip, fire threat. Invite Wike for questioning. PDP governors tell security agencies. The writer says ex-governor's remarks irresponsible. Killings. Deputy Defense Minister, military chiefs hit Sokoto. And then the final story at the most bottom strip of the New Telegraph newspaper this morning says, study debunks claims mobile phones increase brain cancer risk. Study debunks claims mobile phones increase brain cancer risk. That's on page 28 of the New Telegraph newspaper this morning. We look at other papers now.
All right, the Nation newspaper is up next. We have the major headline, why NNPCL filling stations adjusted prices by experts. We'll have the writer, action a betrayal, says NLC. Dangote Refinery petrol ready for sale at fuel stations. The writers, PMS rolls out of 650,000 naira BPD plant, NNPCL to determine product price. At the top strip of the Nation newspaper, we have Otedola hails Tinubu on commencement of petrol production at Dangote Refinery. At the bottom strip, our reforms will lead to economic growth, says Tinubu. And the last headline from the Nation newspaper, court orders arrest of Britain, others for alleged incitement of mutiny. Did I get it right? That's on
mutiny.
page 29. Yeah, not so clear, but yes.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for squinting. Let's check the next paper this morning, the Daily Times newspaper. And the Daily Times newspaper has the big headline, says State of the Nation. Outrage as NNPC raises petrol price to 855 naira per litre. Riders says experts demand incentives to help citizens grapple with hardship. You've betrayed Nigerians, NLC tells Tinubu. At the top strip, Matawale charges troops to flush out bandits in Northwest. AHUON to FG, refund tour operators deposits before 2025 license bidding. That's on page 19. Food insecurity. Nimet DG Anosike canvasses farmers' insurance in Nigeria. Finally, on the top strip, Wike's statement irresponsible, unacceptable, coming from PDP governors. And we have at the bottom strip, equities markets shared 1.12 trillion naira in 2 months amidst rising interest rate. Then finally, just by the side of the photo speak says, President Tinubu meets Chinese leader Xi Jinping as Nigeria, China elevate ties. Stories on the Daily Times newspaper this morning.
Now let's see the Daily Independent newspaper. The major headline, elation as Dangote assures on flooding market with petrol in 24 hours. The riders says refinery will show Nigeria's true petrol consumption. Assures no more importation of polypropylene from October. NNPCL to be responsible for controlling petrol pump price. Dangote to produce 25 million liters of PMS in September. This is coming from NMDPRA. Refinery, historic economic liberation for Nigerians, says Octedola. That is on page 29. At the top strip, PDP governors berate Wike, describe threat as unbridled, irresponsible. I'll skip the riders. The second headline at the top strip says, federal government insists on curbing exploitative practices, not price regulation. At the bottom strip, we have police apprehend hacker who breaches national security. That's on page 7. Childless comment on Obaseki's. Edo women protest, seek apology from Oshomole. That's on page 6. Shetima, Obi, Atiku, Abbas, others attend Yaradua's mother's burial. That's on page 6. And then gunmen bomb police station, kill one in Anambra. That's also on page 6. Despite denial, NNPC stations sell petrol at 897 naira per litre. Others, 950. The last headline, monarchs conniving with illegal miners. EFCC reveals. That is on page 7 of the Daily Independent.
All right, now we look at the Nigerian Tribune and see some of these headlines right here. Outrage as NNPC stations sell petrol above 865 naira per litre. This is all over the front pages this morning. At the top strip, IGP, police mute over tenure extension, says FG has final say. PDP governors blast Wike over irresponsible threat and says Fubara must enjoy his privilege as governor. Dangote lists gains as refinery finally rolls out petrol. That's on page 6. The writer says Nigeria will experience reduced fuel imports. Demand for dollars will drop by 40%. Nigeria will now precisely determine consumption patterns of fuel. Promises no more importation of, I'm trying to say this one, polypropylene as from October. Then we'll look at more stories right here on the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. Tinubu, Xi Jinping meet, elevate Nigeria-China ties and strategic partnership on page 6. Those are the stories I'll take on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune this morning.
Now let's look at the Punch newspaper. The Punch has as major headline, petrol price hike, labor demands reversal, set to meet. That's on page 2. The riders, marketers await Dangote refinery pricing template as NNPCL emerges sole buyer. At the top strip, hunger protest, police squeeze staff of wanted Britain. That's on page 16. PDP governors knock Wike, says Fubara Rivers party leader. That's on page 42. Power generation hits 5,313 megawatts, first time in 3 years. That is on page 28. But is that really reflecting in the country? At the bottom strip we have Oyo Monarchs cancels vice chair, tackles son over Ogbomoso chief imam. That's on page 16. Fleeing Buttock enlargement doctor, now in custody, says Lagos police. That's on pages 4 and 5. 34 Yobe villagers killed by Boko Haram gets mass burial. That's on page 2. That's the last headline from the Punch.
All right. We'll look at the next paper this morning. It's the Guardian newspaper. Big story. On the Guardian newspaper, it says, Confusion over new pump price as Dangote petrol sets for market. That's on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper this morning. We have here suspected secessionists bomb Anambra Police Division on news page 29. On news page 3, Code sends whistleblower to Kuje over classified document leak. 2027, Obi unveils Tanko as coordinator of Obedient Movement. It's getting ready already. PDP governors fold Wike's fire threats. Nigeria, now third most indebted nation to World Bank's IDA worth $2.2 billion loans. Finally, on the front page of the Guardian newspaper, subscribers stranded as NIMC server downtime slows SIM-NIN update. Stories making the front page of the Guardian newspaper this morning.
Next is the Daily Trust. Still on the petrol price hike, NLC, Nasima, others demand petrol price hike reversal. The riders, increase will hurt businesses, worsen inflation. Citizens urge government to reconsider. Dangote Refinery rolls out PMS, silent on costs. That is on page 4. At the top strip, Shatima, Atiku, Barau, Obi, others throng Katsina for Yaradua's mother's burial. Emir Sanusi profiles solutions to Fulani crisis in Nigeria. Nigeria, China sign MOUs as Tinubu meets Xi Jinping. Provide solutions to power crisis, NEC tells Discos. We are in Sokoto to eliminate bandits, says Matawale. Hashtag end bad governance protest. Courts issues arrest warrant of Britain, others. And the last headline, Yobe buries 34 victims of ISWAP attack. The riders, terrorists give reason for killings. Wow. And then we have General Akilu recommends IBB's security strategies to tackle banditry and kidnapping. That's the last headline.
All right, our next paper this morning is a Vanguard newspaper. Has the big headline, anger trails rise in pump price of petrol to 855 naira per litre. Top strip, soaring prices, FCCPC backs down on price control. Blessing talked about that this morning. That's on page 19 of the Vanguard newspaper. FEC will determine price of our petrol, says Dangote. On page 20 of page 4, PDP governors vow to continue supporting Fubara Flay Wike. More stories right here on the Vanguard newspaper, but most of them are pictures. This one says queues persist as Dangote petrol debuts, and then Tinubu in China. But in sports, it says AFCON qualifier Benin to arrive in Nigeria tomorrow. Well, let's get back to the studio and have a conversation right here with the engineer Meshach Oza, who has declared me the #1 empathizer of the Nigeria.